Hi, it's Christina with the Sisyphean Journal. I'm continuing with my reaction to the Triggernometry interview with Dr. Calum Miller, and how it is he came to conclude that abortion is bad for the mothers as well as for the babies. And the section we're about to get into is unwanted children and pregnancies.
But isn't the problem that you're effectively asking the woman to carry this baby, to give birth to this baby, when the baby is unwanted? And as someone who used to teach and used to see unwanted children every day of their lives, it's the most heartbreaking thing. Because you know most of those kids are never going to stand a chance. They're just not.
So what I'd say, I guess, on this question of unwanted children is that I think it's helpful to recall that abortion was originally seen as a solution to that problem. And yet more and more these days we have this so-called problem of so-called unwanted children. Now, I don't think it's ever really accurate to call any child unwanted, because I think every child actually has infinite human value in the same way that the woman does. And every child will be wanted by someone. You know, if you look at the statistics on trying to adopt a newborn baby, in the UK it's pretty much impossible. There are so few newborn babies available for adoption and so many parents who want a child that I think calling them unwanted is probably not very accurate.
You meant unwanted by the parents.
Right, of course, yeah. What I'd say that is that actually when you look at the outcomes of children from unwanted pregnancies, their outcomes are not very significantly different from children from wanted pregnancies. When you look at the studies on this, they do slightly worse than the average child when it comes to certain educational outcomes. But on the whole, most of them are pretty much the same. They have pretty much the same mental health outcomes. And the most important thing is, do they feel like their life was worth living? Even if their life was significantly worse than the average child, most of them would still say, I'm glad to be alive. And so I think what we really need to do, if we're concerned about these unwanted children and their well-being, is simply ask them. Speak to people who have come from an unwanted pregnancy. Speak to people who have been placed for adoption, perhaps. And obviously in some cases they will say, I wish I wasn't alive. But in the overwhelming majority of cases, they will say, I'm glad to be here. And I'm glad that, although it was very difficult to my mum, I'm so grateful to my mum that they went through that form.
The other thing they're forgetting is that there is a huge difference between an unwanted pregnancy and an unwanted baby. When the woman is considering an abortion, it's not that she doesn't want that baby, it's she doesn't want to be in that situation. And if you can fix that situation, then the baby will be just as wanted as if she'd gotten pregnant on purpose. This is what they're finding out at pro-life centers and sort buses all the time. What the woman wants is to be out of that situation, which is pregnant and homeless, pregnant and low income, pregnant and in an abusive situation, pregnant with these health problems. To just say it's the baby she doesn't want is highly simplistic. And it's been known for the 1940s at the very least. It's been known since the 1940s that unwanted pregnancy does not equate to unwanted baby, because I've covered this before, but you have to get through your head that an unwanted pregnancy and an unwanted baby are two very different things. The pregnancy is the situation that she doesn't want to be in. It doesn't mean she wants the baby to be dead.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that I'm here as a result.
And what about the women when they had these unwanted pregnancies and unwanted babies? What was the effect on their lives?
Well, so this is something that, again, is extraordinarily counterintuitive. You think, obviously, putting them through that is going to lead to, massive suffering on their part. And in the last few years, there's been a greater recognition, even from researchers who support abortion and use their research to support abortion rights and access. There's been an increasing admission that actually, if you don't provide women that option of abortion, women who become pregnant, don't want the child, even women who try and get an abortion and are turned away, the overwhelming majority of them eventually have the baby. They don't seek abortion elsewhere. And the overwhelming majority of women who have the baby are glad that they had the baby. And I think we can often get into a situation where we're thinking, kind of, in the immediate situation, a woman's become pregnant, she doesn't want to be, and it's potentially a horrendous situation. All of us can empathize with that situation and think, that must be a horrendous panic situation. The woman at that point must feel absolutely horrendous, and most likely she does in many of those cases, and it's complete panic. And abortion is therefore seen as a huge relief. But when you give this situation time, what the researchers found from this study in the US is that most of those women who were denied an abortion kept the baby. And of those who kept the baby, 96% of them at the child's 5th birthday say, I'm glad that I kept the baby, even though they didn't have a choice about it. And so this is a statistic that I think is not very widely known, that when you actually give people the time and give them the support, almost everyone comes around and says, I'm glad I had the baby in the end. Whereas by contrast, in the case of abortion, there are significant rates of regret. It's not that most women regret abortion, most of them don't, but a significant minority of women regret abortion. And we know that objectively they have poorer mental health outcomes. So if you take women that have an unwanted pregnancy, and some of them have an abortion, some of them keep the baby, the women who have an abortion have higher rates of suicide, of anxiety, of drug misuse, of alcohol misuse, and they're more likely to die within the following year than women who keep the baby. And so, again, it's an absolutely intuitive and understandable thought. A woman who's in a crisis pregnancy situation, surely the best thing for her to do is for her to choose to have an abortion, and that's the end of the situation. But when you look at the empirical reality, when you speak to the women who've been in this situation and you collect all those stories and voices together, you find that actually abortion is not the kind of liberating kind of solution that it is portrayed as. Actually, it is often another trauma, whereas by contrast, having the baby, of course, is stressful, and I'm sure you'll find this out in due course. And I wish you the best of luck. But actually, when it comes to that fundamental question, am I glad this happened? The overwhelming majority of women who keep the baby after seeking an abortion are glad that it happened. And I think sometimes all it takes is time and support. And thankfully that support is usually available.
There's one more.
And when they're talking about time and support, again, this is why the abortion lobby wants to shut down the pro-life centers, because they give the women that time and support. Whatever the reason is, she's saying, you know, abortion is the answer. Why? Well, my mortgage is in foreclosure. I'm going to wind up homeless with 3 kids, and then pregnant, and then eventually homeless with, 3 kids and a newborn. And the pro-lifers are like, okay, let's get your mortgage out of arrears so you can keep your home. And, to us, that makes a whole lot more sense than, okay, give us some money that could have been spent getting your mortgage out of arrears, and you can have this dead baby and still be homeless with the 3 other kids. That makes no sense to us. You address the situation, the holistic situation that she's in. So that was this section, and so we're gonna end this segment here.